Farming subsidies are a very key point to almost any economy around the world. In fact, it's very, very surprising to not see a country with any form of supporting their farmers. And indeed, the Common Agricultural Policy that we were a part of gave British farmers a whole heck lot of money because, again, we are an island and it's very hard for farmers, especially, to try and gain a foothold on the continent. So, in a gesture of fairness, the European Union said, okay, here's this money, which will make up for small farmers essentially being cut out of the the common market, essentially, as it was at the time. And it was a big win for Margaret Thatcher. It was a massive win for Margaret Thatcher, massive. And now we have Conservatives essentially deciding that they are going to completely remove this subsidy. And it makes it even more funnier because, again, they don't seem to understand that, again, our farming sector is quite small compared to other countries. And yes, our closest, when we are selling food and agricultural products, you look at any country, they always sell to their closest neighbors. Now, yes, we can sort of technically sell to like Canada and the US, but the problem there is that, especially for the US, their agricultural sector is so strong that it is incredibly hard to actually make any dent into that market. So almost selling into that market is almost self-defeating. So overall, British farmers here, and especially the four small ones, which, remember, this statistic goes all the way back to 2016, that any small British farmers, if they have their subsidies removed, which they are in this case, about 80% will just go out of business. And surprise, surprise, this is what they are doing now, meaning that this is going to have a massive effect on farmers, and especially tenant farmers as well. This could backfire on the Tories massively. I mean, massively on this. So let's dive into this and find out more about this. But before we do that, please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and a one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can, well, buy me coffee. And of course, the YouTube memberships are open as well. So let's go jumping into this. This comes from the London Economic with the title, Farmers to have the 1.8 billion pre-Brexit cash removed amid warning that many will go bust. Farmers in England will have their direct payments worth about 1.8 billion in 2019 and 2020 through the EU's Common Agricultural policy cut by a half by 2025 and then completely taken away by 2027 under the new government moves. And of course, this is amid a new parliamentary report that has warned of the blind optimism shown by Tory ministers who could force many small and tenant farmers in England out of business, while accusing them of not doing enough to gain farmers' trust in delivering crucial plans. Under the government plans, farmers are encouraged to free up land for environmental reasons. So essentially, at this point, under the government's new plans, they're being told, don't be farmers anymore, you're going to be environmental wardens, which is not what people go into farming for, you know. But here we have it. But the report also warned this would mean that England will import more of its food from other countries with often poorer environmental standards, making the UK more dependent on food from abroad and making food prices more expensive. Again, we were told during the 2016 referendum, you vote for Brexit, prices are going to come down. The paper has also warned that it is likely to lead to farms getting bigger, which will in turn harm the environment against the government's hopes. The Department for Environmental, Food and Rural Affairs, or DEFRA, is intending to try and match the £2.4 billion worth of subsidies given by the EU's Common Agricultural Policy to UK farmers every year. But this comes with the intention to cut the amount of direct payments, depending on the size of the land farmed, according to the Independent. The chair and the Tory MP, Sir Godfrey Clifton Brown, said, "We have known that we were replacing the cap since 2016, and we still see no clear plans, objectives, or even communications with those at the very sharp end, the farmers, in this multi-billion pound radical overhaul of the way land is used and, more critically, food is produced in this country. The UK is already a very large net importer of food, and we have heard in evidence of the LMS of the vague ambition to try and maximize the value to society of the landscape. Many in reality just means increases further." Meanwhile, of course, Labour's Shadow Environmental Secretary Jim McMahon said the Tories are falling far short to try and help the farmers with the trade deals that indeed undercut our rural businesses, leaving them exposed and rightly feeling let down. He added, just this week, the Environmental Secretary tried to dodge the responsibility for making sure that farmers get a fair deal from major retailers, despite the rocketing food and production prices. For our country to thrive, we need to see more food grown at home, to have a high standard and through sustainable processes. But the government isn't listening. But of course, the Environmental Secretary, George Eustice, said that DEFRA disagreed with many of the issues presented by the report, and it is accused of not including recent developments, whilst arguing that UK farmers will be paid better post-Brexit. He said farmers' incomes will have improved significantly since the UK voted to leave in 2016, and there will never be a better time to improve the way we reward farmers, Eustice said. This is something, again, we made clear, very, very clear back in 2016, even back at the Remain campaign. Farmers will be worse off outside the EU. It's already that case right now. Again, if Eustice, another thing is, if Eustice had figures to show that farmers were being better paid outside of the EU than in, he'd be showing them. And we've said this before. If Brexit was actually succeeding, Brexiteers would be flashing numbers, showing statistics, mentioning them constantly. Every single day, we've got 20% this, we've got 30% that, we've got 10% extra this. They'd be constantly at it, trying to prove that Brexit has indeed worked. And if this was the case, that farmers are, quote, being better paid, what are the numbers? I looked for this. I can't find any evidence that farmers are better off currently than they are. And bear in mind, this is only the first year of, shall we say, Brexit properly. So yet again, and it's not just the farmers here that are being betrayed, it's also the fishermen as well. Don't think that I've forgotten about them. They're just as bad a state as they ever were. So this is just going to come back to haunt the Tories, especially with the trade deals that they're cutting, which are massively undermining their own home, their own home producers. We've seen it with the Australian deal, where they just rolled over. That's probably going to be the same with the New Zealand deal as well. And like I say, this trade deal, the Australian trade deal especially, has set the tempo for future trade deals. So this will now become the norm and standard. And as we've said before, a lot of people in this country, trade deals aren't a bigger thing. But if you go to places like America, Canada, even Australia and other places around the world, trade deals are a massive political thing and can affect parties for decades if they have seen to have, signed a bad trade deal. So ultimately, here you have the Tories down south losing their support from the farmers, losing the support from those rural agricultural industries that the down south they especially most rely on. And the narrative should go forward that the Tories have betrayed the farmers over Brexit. And then we all need to do is add to the narrative that, hey, Brexit was always going to be like this. And then you have to ask the question of, well, guys, should we just rejoin the European Union? And, I've always said it. We will be back in the European Union. Sooner or later, we will be back. And more every day, we see public opinion turning against Brexit, saying that it's been bad, that it hasn't gone well. Even in the newspapers recently have really started to turn against Brexit, saying it's the first year. What have you got to show for this? You've got to show absolutely nothing for it. And that's why there's such high anxiety at the moment in the Brexiteers, because their grandioso project is not going well, because it was based on a fantasy. And as we've said before, when fantasy meets reality, reality always wins. So with that, as always, thank you very much for watching. Please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button on your way out. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and a one-up link called Buy Me a Coffee, where you can, well, buy me a coffee. And as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, we'll see you all next time.